Okay, so in the last chapter, Isabel's on the run, Ruth has been sold, and Madame is not happy with Isabel. In fact, she says she's going to have her hung. Ooh. Okay, so remember, Isabel's on the run. Colonel Regan was sitting in a chair, a white cloth around his neck, his face covered with a foamy soap and his eyes closed. Behind him stood a barber, a slave, I assumed, because of his African skin, with grizzled hair and an apron. On the table beside him stood a bowl of steaming water, a leather strop for blades, and a cup of lather with a brush in it. He turned the colonel's chin with one finger, then delicately shaved away a stripe of soap with a razor. "By your leave, sir," said the sentry. "I am busy," the colonel said without opening his eyes. "This girl knew the password, insisted on seeing you," the sentry continued. The barber scraped off another stripe of soap and whiskers. "Take her to Jameson," the colonel said. "No," I said. The barber froze in mid-shave, and the colonel opened his eyes. "Please, sir, you must help me," I said quickly, "as I once helped you. She sold my sister. Please, sir, I'll do anything. Just find Ruth. She's so small and—" And the door behind us opened. Two more sentries filed in, followed by Madame Lockton, breathing hard, and a tall gentleman I had never seen before. My sentry waved me farther into the room so that the newcomers might all fit. I worked my way toward an open window. "What is the meaning of this?" the colonel asked wearily. Madame's voice cracked across the room. "Are you the man in charge?" The colonel sighed deeply, waved off the barber, and stood up, his face still half covered with soap. "Colonel Thomas Regan at your service, ma'am." He bowed stiffly from the waist. "How can I be of service?" "You have stolen my property," Madame announced. "We have several clerks assigned to record civilian concerns. My sergeant will show you—" "I will not speak with subordinates or grubby clerks," she said. "That chit of a girl belongs to me, Colonel. She has committed terrible crimes and must be punished. I demand you return her to me." The barber rinsed the razor in the water bowl. Colonel Regan looked from Madame to me and back again. "What did she do?" "She abused me most violently, sir." The colonel put out his hand, and the barber placed a clean towel in it. "Yet it is the girl with blood on her face," the colonel said, wiping away the soap from his chin and cheeks. Madame's eyes narrowed. "Give her to me." The sentries shifted their boots on the floor. One cleared his throat. The gentleman who accompanied Madame stepped forward. "The law is quite clear on this matter, sir. None of us want to live in a world where servants rule their masters. Both the Parliament and the Congress give Madame Lockton rule over her slave." A flock of crows swooped past the window. A three-masted ship, sails unfurled, pushed down the river. Ruth could be on that ship. Or she was already at sea in a dark hole with no candles. Who would feed her? Who would hold her when she shook? "The girl says you've sold her sister," Colonel Regan said. "Do you mean to purchase Sal for the army?" Madame asked. "I'm sure she'd make a passing fine washwoman. I shall expect full payment in cash for her." He handed the towel back to the barber. "A washwoman is the one thing I don't need right now. If you had any manservants capable of ditch digging, I'd take you up on the offer, but—" And he paused and shook his head. I looked out the window again. One crow had come back. It landed on a carcass near the water's edge, a dead dog or a rat. The crow pecked at the meat of the thing, snatched a pink strip in his beak, and tugged until the piece broke away. He beat his wings once, twice, and flew up in the air high enough to catch a breeze that rode him out over the water. Another man entered the room. The night of my first visit to the fort, he had worn his uniform coat over his nightshirt. Now his coat was properly buttoned and his breeches tucked into his boots. "Thomas, we cannot interfere," he said. This girl is not our concern. And you are late. We dare not keep him waiting. I looked out the window at the carcass. Please, sir, I said in a quiet voice, let me stay. Colonel Regan fastened his collar without looking at me. The law binds my hands and my actions. You must return with your mistress, he said, concentrating on his task. Even during time of war, we must follow the rules of propriety and civilization. And with that, the matter was concluded. Madame turned to thank the man who aided her. The sentries slipped into the hall. Colonel Regan picked up his hat from the table and set it on his head. As I stepped toward the window, the barber studied me close. He shook his head once from side to side, just as Jenny had back in Rhode Island 100 years ago, so it seemed. Bad advice on both occasions. I bolted for the window, and I almost made it. Poor Isabel. Sounds like she's back as part of Madame's household. Okay, let's see how far we can get into this chapter. When I woke, the barrel of a gun was stuck up underneath my chin. Men voices shouted, boots stomped, a rain of hands grabbed at me, countless bodies, smelly breath, unwashed feet. My head felt cracked in 3 pieces. A woman shrieked and shrieked. She was a crow shattering the air with her harsh calls. I moved, not by my own devices. My toes dragged in the dirt. They tripped to pull my arms from my body, ripping the arms off like a cloth doll. They dragged me from one place to a second place. More shouts, more shrieks and whistles and calls, rumbling thunder voices. They dragged me from the second place to the third place, every voice sowing the wind, all things summoning the whirlwind that would sweep us all away to drown in the deepest sea. My thoughts would not line up like good soldiers. They swarmed afield and fled, chasing the blood that dripped from my head and stained my shirt. My eyes were swelled up and hard to see through. Someone had stolen a tooth or two. They tied my hands together with prickly rope. They tied the rope to the back of a cart. They tied a horse to the front of the cart. The horse lifted one tired hoof after another and dragged the cart, and the cart dragged me up the broad street where people smiled and laughed and pointed. My eyes cast down, the cobblestones mocked too. I tried to figure the whos and the whys of the matter, but my own name escaped me, and I knew the only pain in my head and the iron taste of lost teeth. My memory broke into bits when they beat my head. They took me to the dungeon under City Hall to await my trial. The jailer locked me in a cell with a toothless madwoman who huddled in the corner and spat at me. She pulled the hairs from her head and dropped them to the mud. She was near bald. At sunset, the jailer came back with a cup of water and a piece of foul pork, half the size of my hand. Dirty men in the other cells fought each other all night long. On the second day, we heard shouts and screams from the world above us. Then came the boom and roar of cannons, followed by the crack of musket fire and the sounds of hundreds of boots shaking the earth. Some prisoners hollered in panic and tried to pull their chains from the stone walls. The madwoman in my cell laughed and laughed, slapping her skirt. At last the noise above ceased. The jailers threw buckets of cold water on the men who had lost their senses in fear. They said for us to shut our gobs. The British had sailed their warships up the North River and had fired on the town, but now all danger was past. Anyone who continued to blubber would feel the lash. I said not a word. The second night was same as the first, filled with moans and muttering, scratching, and the sound of teeth and claw. It rained. Water pooled on the floor and soaked through my shoes. Rats wandered in and out of the cells, squeezing their fat bottoms through the bars. I dared not sleep for fear they would bite me. The madwoman and the rats stayed in the corner, red eyes waiting for me all night long. On the third morning, the jailer unlocked my cell and motioned for me to follow him. The madwoman laughed again. He took me up the stairs to the courtroom. It was as big as the inside of a church, with the same white walls and dark wood. The windows were of clear glass, grimy with neglect. They stood me behind a rail, kept my hands tied. I shook with fever and hunger. "Oi, oi, oi," called a man in the shadows. He said more, but his words were slurred together. A tall man wearing black robes and a long wig sat at a table that was raised on a platform. He was a judge. This was a court. My head was broke, and my sister was stolen, and I was lost. The woman with the crow voice, her that threw the picture at me, stood up. I raised my head to look at her. Someone poked a stick into my ribs hard and hissed at me, and I lowered my eyes. Voices buzzed and blurred into words that I didn't understand. Lockton, I finally remembered. Lockton, Madame Lockton, her that brought us, her that stole Ruth away. I kept my head down, but lifted my eyes, even though they pained me. The pain was good. It drew back the curtain of my mind and forced me to pay attention. Madame was pretending to cry into her lace handkerchief. "And I, but a poor woman alone, my husband having fled for reasons I cannot comprehend. I plead with you, Your Honor, to assist me in the correct punishment of this girl." The judge frowned and asked questions of two officers who stood near Madame. I wanted to ask about Ruth and where the blood on my shirt came from and who broke my teeth, but I was the only person in the room whose hands were tied, so I kept silent. Questions were asked of the incident. Lies were given as answers. Finally, the judge said, "Where is the housekeeper who saw this crime, Mrs. Lockton?" "Oh, Becky is indisposed, sir," Madame answered. "She suffers the ague." "And there are no other witnesses to the events you describe?" The stranger stood up in the back of the room. "I was passing in the street, Your Honor," he said. "I heard the commotion, saw the girl fleeing, and observed the destruction myself." "There are several other people who are standing willing to testify, Your Honor," Madame added. Her tears had mysteriously vanished. The judge used the end of his quill to scratch at an itch under his wig. "It is clear that this slave has violated the person of her master, destroyed valuable property, and attempted to run away, all contrary to the laws of our colony." State, Your Honor," reminded the lawyer. "We are a state now, independence and all that." The judge rolled his eyes. "Colony, state, who knows what we will be next?" He sighed deeply. "No matter. The girl's crimes of insolence, property destruction, and running away from her rightful owner are not devious enough to warrant a sentence of death. Do you have any wishes as to the punishment that I should consider, Mrs. Lockton?" Madame sighed deeply, like my behavior caused her great sadness. "She is a willful girl, Your Honor, with numerous character defects. I believe a permanent reminder of this day might prove the appropriate remedy." Her words stuck in the air like flies caught in a spider web. I could make no sense of them. I could make no sense of anything. Her head is, since she got kicked and hit, her head's kind of confused. The judge scratched at his wig with fresh vigor. "You want her branded, then? 20 strokes of the lash would be more in keeping with her crimes." "We are now led by men from Virginia, I am told," she said, "land of my birth. I assure Your Honor that in Virginia we do not tolerate the rebellion of slaves." The judge nodded. "Once kindled, rebellion can spread like wildfire. Do you want your husband's initials used?" Madame shot a sideways glance at me. "I prefer the girl branded with the letters I for insolence. It will alert people to her tendencies and serve as a reminder of her weakness." The judge picked up his gavel. "So be it. Sal Lockton, it is the order of this court that you be branded on your right cheek with the letter of I, in punishment for your crimes against your lady mistress." Crack! And the gavel cracked on the block of wood. "Next case," said the judge. Ooh, so she's going to be branded. And if you know what branded means, it means they're going to burn the letter I onto her cheek, and it will be there forever.